Gray, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I've noticed about a lot of interior design videos on YouTube is that the designer will start out by saying, of course, you should do anything that you want. You should absolutely feel free to, you know, ignore my advice. And then they go on to give like hard and fast rules about what you should and shouldn't do. What's your take on the so-called rules of interior design?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely of the opinion that anybody should do whatever makes them happy. Like, it's your space. You do what you want with it. If it's going to make you happy, do it. If it's breaking a cardinal rule of design, who cares, right? Like, that being said, there's a reason some things look good, right? So I understand why there are rules to interior design, design in general, because especially when you're trying to teach others how to do it,
Right.
it's helpful to have some baseline. So I understand that that's a thing. I also have my own rules, right? So like, there are some things that we'll talk about in this video that like, happy to see other people do them, not for me. But I think you're right. I think a lot of people, they go in with the intention of being like, do whatever you want. And then you get to like the third rule in the video and it's like, you can never do this. You should never do it. So, yeah, I totally agree. Do what you want. And this is going to be us, taking advice from other people that we absolutely respect. We probably agree with a lot of their opinions. And we might disagree slightly with some of these because, to be quite honest, like the changes that we make, like will make our lives better. They make us more comfortable, or, it's easier to live that way, even if it might not be perfectly aesthetically pleasing. Or it might be just completely different than what you see in the average person's house. So,
yeah. For myself, there was a time in my life when I was really influenced by somebody saying, this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do. And I sometimes worry that, like, sometimes it's just a matter of taste. And there's like a whole history in the field of design of just exactly the opposite. And I think that if you really admire somebody, and all of the interior designers that we're going to talk about today are, as you were saying, incredibly admirable, and we do admire them and have learned a lot from them. But I think that when people give sort of hard and fast shoulds, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, it can be easy to be influenced by that and feel like, oh, I'm not bold enough, to break that rule. So I guess the bottom line is that we really want to give people permission to break whatever rules there are out there, even if we agree with the rule, like, people should feel free to totally break them. So just to set this up, in this video, Carolyn is redecorating her bedroom in a rental house, and she has used this amazing, bold, floral peel and stick wallpaper on her ceiling, which is just fabulous. And then goes on to say that you might think that you might be inclined to use other floral patterns, but it might be too matchy-matchy.
When picking a pattern, some people might be tempted to select another floral pattern to match the wallpaper, but if you want to take your design up a notch, consider friction. Friction is basically veering away from doing something too matchy-matchy. You can create friction by adding in unexpected pattern or color, or even styles, and that'll bring a bit of edge and keep your space from feeling predictable.
I take her point about friction, and we can talk about that, but the idea that having multiple floral patterns in a room is matchy-matchy, I take enormous exception with. So let's just look at a few photographs of some designers who I really love, who use multiple floral prints in one room, and it totally works. One of my favorite examples of using multiple florals in the same room is Sophie Robinson, who is a British interior designer, and her guest room. This is a photograph of her guest room. And I think she counted them once, and there were like, I can't remember exactly, but it was something like 10 different floral prints in that room. And you can see a whole bunch of them right here in this photograph, this little photograph, right on the bed. There's multiple florals on the pillows and on the bedspread. Yeah, the rug is a floral. I think that there's some. I think that photograph above the bed has flowers in it. I can't really see the lampshade very well, but it might be floral. I don't know. Again, here you can see there's florals in the pillows. There's florals in the comforter cover. There's a floral rug on the floor. Multiple florals, and it's probably not for everybody, but I love it. It's absolutely pleasing and satisfying to me. And I also, this is another example. This is Sophie's bedroom. I have to admit, I have like the ultimate parasocial relationship with Sophie Robinson because I've been following her for so long, and she spent like years renovating her home and doing an amazing job of sharing it on her stories on Instagram. So I feel like I've been in her house. I absolutely have not, but I'm going to speak about it as though I have. So this is her bedroom, and you can see the florals on the headboard and the floral on the pillow and a floral on the comforter. So this is a sort of very British kind of country interior design style, like multiple florals, and you absolutely can do it. And I think that you had some thoughts, Gray, about rhyming versus friction and being matchy, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think Carolyn's is exactly right about friction, right? You want to have some contrast, something that, is going to kind of trick the eye. But when you're talking about these floral patterns, they work for a reason, right? Like there's many different colors, there's many different types, sizes of, floral patterns in these examples here. And I think that makes sense that it all works together, because if you go to a garden, right, you're going to see many different sizes, types of flowers, different colors. And I don't know if I've ever been to a garden full of flowers, like a cottage garden, and thought, oh no, these clash. These don't go together. So I think that makes sense. But you want to have rhythm, right? Like you want to have repeating colors, repeating patterns within a space in order to kind of train the eye to go to where you want it to go, right?
Right.
That is also, I think, something that's important. Friction's important. Rhythm is as well. I think, it doesn't have to look too matchy with multiple florals or multiple types of the same pattern, but you can also embrace the matchiness. And I had a couple examples of that as well. The reason I like these, I can like these sort of repeating patterns is because it almost like envelops you, right? Like it reminds you of being in the middle of a garden. It can, even though it's very busy, it can be extremely cozy, especially if you have them all around you. You can see a couple of these where the patterns are on the ceiling. And I like when this is done a lot, when you can see like you're in the attic and you have the A-frame to wallpaper that. But you can see the very similar patterns, very similar colors. And it just makes it nice and cozy and comforting. And this reminds me of, walking through like a forest. I don't know if anybody walks through a forest and doesn't feel calm, right? The trees all around you, enveloping you. I think that can absolutely work.
I think that those are some great examples of the next interior design rule that we think that you should absolutely feel free to break.
Starting with number 1, dark painted ceilings. Oh my goodness. This is something to skip no matter what. The only time that you ever want to have a dark ceiling in your room is when your room is all dark. Now, there's a very valid design reason why. Because when your room is lighter and then you paint a darker ceiling or just a brighter color like this green, the reality of it is you foreshorten the experience of the room's height. And so Who wants to live in a space that feels like it's tighter than it actually is? You don't. So never, never do a dark ceiling unless, like this gorgeous blue bedroom, the whole room is dark and then it's yummy, pops up, and it's perfect.
All right, well, kudos to Lisa because she actually doesn't give any disclaimers being like, you can do whatever you want. She just asserts her opinion, and you gotta respect that.
Never
ever do this. Ever do a dark ceiling. And I mean, here's the thing: like, she's not wrong about the fact that it visually shortens a room. It absolutely can do that. I mean, that's just how it's going to work. But I don't think that's always such a bad thing. And I think there are particular rooms within a house where you might want to do that. Or you might want to use a ceiling to visually guide where you want somebody to go in that space, right? Just an example here, you can see a painted ceiling that actually works to guide the eye down the hallway. And yes, this is shortening the height of a room, but it's also elongating the room as well, right? So these different things play tricks on the eye, and it's not always a bad thing. Like I was talking about before with the patterns on the ceiling, you may want to have, a ceiling that makes the room cozy. This is an example. If the entire room was painted white and the ceiling was white as well, it'd be a pretty boring room. But what makes it really interesting is the ceiling. What I also love is that sometimes painting a ceiling actually serves to act as an architectural detail, right? Like in this room, there's nothing on the ceiling. There's no ceiling detail. There's no crown molding, but it looks quite elegant nonetheless, right? It's almost acting as crown molding. And I think it could be a really interesting thing for people to do if maybe the room's a little bit too short to do crown molding, or maybe it's just way too expensive, because it really is. You could paint it. You could even bring it down just a little bit onto the wall and get that border and really make it quite interesting. There's a few examples. I think it's funny because I pulled this example together as something that I like, and I think it's almost exactly like what she put in her video as something to avoid. But all of these things are visually interesting, especially this room. It's a very modern space. If you didn't have these colors in here, it might be kind of boring, and it might be maybe feeling like a little bit too open, right? That orangish brown ceiling makes it cozy.
I just love those examples that you pulled together, and I do think that oh my gosh, that one's beautiful. I do think that it's an interesting point that you make, that you have an image that you pull together as something that you think is beautiful and that you love, that is almost exactly the same as an image that Lisa used as something that you should never, never do, which I just think sort of goes to the point that we've been trying to make, which is that different people have different tastes. And and I totally respect if Lisa doesn't like dark painted ceilings. That's great for her. And she's allowed to say never, never do it in her own videos. Absolutely. But I just want people to know that that actually isn't a hard and fast rule of interior design. And there's lots and lots of really respected interior designers, who have really great taste and who do this. One example that came to my mind was an interior designer that I love named Kate Watson-Smythe, another British interior designer who has a great blog called Mad About the House. She has a whole blog post about how you mustn't forget. I mean, she's almost the opposite. Like, you mustn't forget the ceilings. And I also think that Gray's point is a really good one, that Lisa is not wrong about the effect of a dark ceiling in an otherwise light room, but that might actually be an effect that you like, and that it might create a space that feels a certain way that you're trying to create, and that's great. That's fine. Lisa had some other advice, didn't she? About painted trim?
Did.
is dark painted trim. Gosh, guys, this has the same sort of problem as number 1, in that when you have a room that's overall light and then you paint all the trim really dark, what that does is it breaks up the flow of your eye across the room, which has the effect of making the room feel foreshortened and smaller and cut up. What you want is you want a room that flows with the eye and moves easily. And that way you get a nice voluminous experience to the space. So skip the dark painted trim forever.
Forever. Oh man. Your beautiful arts and crafts house, just get rid of it. Throw it in the garbage.
Paint that trim a high gloss white.
Oh, high glass white trim. Okay. So yeah. First thing I wanted to say is this is my house, so I've failed miserably at Lisa's rule. I love painted trim, and I think that's reason enough. I don't even feel the need to give a rebuttal. I will, but I don't even feel the need to give a rebuttal because I just love it. I love the way this looks, and we have tons of painted trim in our house. Painted trim that is not white, and yeah, she's right. Again, it absolutely can serve to break up the room, but it also can create some amazingly visual interests, right? It can frame another room, especially if you have something like this where you've got a door, but you've got windows, or you've got an archway. It can serve to frame something beautiful on the other side. So if it works in the space like that, absolutely feel free to color your trim. In this case, it's adding a lot of visual interest in the hallway, right? Sort of guiding the eye, framing a room down at the end. But yeah, all of this serves to like beautifully frame the space. But what's really so upsetting about that particular those particular images that Lisa was showing is that she's showing wood trim. So yes, it's dark trim, but it's not painted. It's wood trim, and there is tons of history of wood trim in the Victorian era. It's a feature in craftsmen, arts and crafts homes, and it's beautiful. I mean, the amount of work that goes into having wood trim, I would hope that even though it breaks up the room, you can appreciate its beauty. One of the reasons I like this dark wood trim so much is that it is fully featured in the arts and crafts era, right? And that's just such a lovely period to look into, because it was really like a response to the Industrial Revolution. There's some like prominent socialist thinkers and designers, William Morris, Philip Webb, during that time that wanted to respond to that period where goods were being made cheaper, the rich were getting richer, the poor were getting poorer, and they wanted to go back to that celebrating the craftsman, right? And so this wood is a feature of the house, and I think absolutely can be embraced. Martha, I know you also like colored trim as well, maybe just because of the colored aspect of it, but I wondered if you have anything else to share here.
Well, I do. Well, first of all, I will just say that some of those photographs that you shared, which I'm looking at for the first time, like the one with the bright red trim in the hallway, and the ones that you explained frame almost like a picture in the next room. I looked at those photographs and like sort of, I don't know, like almost gasped with delight. I was trying not to gasp while you were talking, but I just find them incredibly beautiful. And again, different people, different taste. In my own home, I often paint the trim because I live in a house that is sort of a working class, turn of the 20th century, but very working class kind of home where all the trim was already painted and it's not very nice trim. And I kind of want it to disappear. I don't want to really see the trim and make it stand out. So I paint the trim the same color as the walls. And that has been really effective in kind of making it disappear and giving me that feeling of, coziness and feeling, I don't know, wrapped around by color. So I definitely do love that. But that's not exactly what Lisa was talking about. But I hadn't really even thought about this until I was looking at all of those wonderful photographs of arts and crafts houses and the dark wood trim. But I'm reminded that actually grew up not in an arts and crafts house. I don't even know what the sort of architectural style of the house I grew up in. But it was in rural Indiana. It was a farmhouse. I guess that's a style, right? Indiana farmhouse. And I'm sure that the people who built it and initially lived in it were not fancy people at all. But I'm also betting that, like my father, they were really fine craftsmen or knew really fine craftsmen. And so that house, although it was pretty simple in a farmhouse kind of way, it had just incredibly beautiful trim. And the staircase was all dark wood, and there was a French door that went from the dining room into the living room that was itself dark wood and that was surrounded by dark wood trim. And the thought of somebody painting all of that wood a light color is just like, the carpenter's daughter in me is just horrified at the thought of somebody painting all of that wood. And I'm not opposed to putting color on wood. And we may talk about that later in the video when it comes to painted furniture. But yeah, the dark wood trim was a feature of the house. And I think that probably it was, for these fairly simple farmers who built and lived in this house, it was like a point of pride for them, because it did represent such craftsmanship,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, it is interesting. I mean, I can get on board with some people not liking, black painted trim. Like, that's not for everybody, of course. But, I'd hope that if you walked into one of those places that, she had displayed, that you'd be happy and you'd embrace it. But again, everybody can do what they want to do.
Right, which is our point. The next example flows really clearly from the first and the second, in that this advice is really not a hard and fast rule, but a matter of taste.
Think real hard before you spend your hard-earned cash on a big ticket item with a crazy pattern or a wild, unusual color. A sofa's a pretty big purchase, so chances are you're probably going to want to hold on to it for a longer period of time. I promise you, it's the absolute worst when 2 years after you bought it, you start having cold sweats because deep down you're over your pink sofa. And then every time you look at it, you begin to despise it just a little bit more, until your sofa becomes nothing but the physical manifestation of constant regret and the reminder of all your bad decisions. And this is why I always recommend going neutral on your big upholstery pieces.
I think that I felt as strongly about this as you felt about the Lisa Holt's advice about painted trim and dark wood trim. I would say that my biggest regret, maybe barring none, as I've been designing my own home, is a beige sofa that I bought. I bought it for exactly the reason that Posh Pennies argues here, which is that I was afraid that I would regret something else and that it would just be sort of a nice neutral background piece, and that I could create, put color and pattern in other places. This was when I left my first marriage and I was spending some money on new furniture, and oh my gosh, do I regret the beige sofa partly just because it's beige. And like, can you even imagine that I bought a beige sofa? I don't know what I was thinking.
I don't believe it.
I can maybe
you must have it covered with some very colorful. Okay, yeah,
I do. It's now covered with like a very colorful quilt, and it's in my art studio because But on top of that, it just got so dirty so fast. Like even if I wanted and loved a beige sofa, like I don't have the kind of lifestyle or the kind of family or the kind of pets that can like handle neutral beige or gray or white furniture. And so, even if you love beige furniture, it's going to get dirty really fast if you have any kind of real life. But I also think that, like, I think a lot of these interior designers have these rules, and then they pick like the ugliest example. Well, I mean, maybe that sofa isn't ugly to everyone that Posh Penny's kept zooming in on as she's talking about how you're surely going to regret buying,
how can you
a pattern
regret all those clams
sofa,
whatever they were.
Right, but like maybe you would regret that one, but there's so many others, and a chintz sofa, a highly patterned sofa. I think that there's a long history of highly patterned furniture, especially for me, in the English sort of country style that I really love. Chintz, florals are really timeless, as they like to say. And if you love it, then you should absolutely buy it. And I do have a few examples that I'd love to show. This is in that guest bedroom of Sophie Robinson's, yet another floral pattern there on the chair in the corner, and not just floral, but you see the stripes down below, like just highly, highly patterned. She also has a couch that I would just die for. This chintz sofa that she recently bought, and that I so wish that I had had the guts to buy when I was buying my beige sofa. I would just love something like this. And in fact, my intention is to buy some really, floral or highly patterned fabric and teach myself how to reupholster my beige sofa. But I could have just skipped that whole process if I had just had the guts to buy the sofa in the first place. Here's an example of a chair that I just really love, that I think I would never get sick of. This is from House and Garden magazine.
I can tell how much we love House and Garden.
I know. Here's another example of a sofa that is highly patterned, and that, again, I don't think that I would ever get sick of. I just love it.
No, and this one's heavily patterned, but also like relatively neutral, right? Like the two colors combined make like a nice kind of soft green, which would go with a lot of things. So
exactly,
you can also go with something crazy pattern, but it's, somewhat subtle.
Here's another example of a chair that I just, again, if you really love something and you really trust your gut, as opposed to sort of going with something that's trendy, you're not going to lose interest in that piece. You're not going to ever get sick of it. I think that if you go with something highly patterned because it's trendy and it's not actually something that you just sort of instinctively love, then you very well may get sick of it. But these are just some examples of things that I would never get sick of.
Yeah, and I think I like Posh Penny's a lot because she does really try and give people advice about how to make your money go farther, right? Like, here's how to do some practical things that will in the long run save you some money. I totally respect that, right? But obviously everyone's different. I think your advice, the number one piece of advice here is, if you love to look at it, you probably will continue to love looking at it down the line, right? If you love to look at it because it fits a trend currently, that's, I think, a different story. But the other thing is, sometimes crazy pattern sofas might be like the best thing when it comes to if you have dogs and kids, right? Like I I made the worst mistake. I love them to death, but I have one black dog and I have one white dog. So I can't pick like all white furniture. I can't pick all dark furniture. If I pick something that has lots of pattern in it, actually that probably that hides the most, pet fur. So yeah, I do stand by, making decisions that aren't going to cost you in the long run. But, this is one where, trust your gut and, do something that you love and make the rest of the room go with it,
Exactly. I think of it almost as a piece of art, like I wouldn't say, oh, I'm not going to buy that piece of art because I might get sick of it. I might stop loving it. If you love a piece of art, you know it, and you could keep it on your wall forever. And I feel like a sofa, it's not exactly a piece of art, but the fabric might actually be highly artistic. And I think in the same way, you may enjoy that piece of furniture for the rest of your life. Hopefully you will. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So here's one that I really took issue with. And the reason is I have collected Bluetooth, Wi-Fi colored lights for the last 10 years. So anytime I could scrape some money together and get a discount on one of these lights, I bought one. And I've had them and I've loved them in every single apartment. And Arvin had a specific take on these. And, a lot of times I do agree with him. But this is one where, I definitely take issue. I take personal offense.
This next trend that I don't want to see in 2023. The Philips Hue lights. This is giving rave. This is giving bar. This is giving EDC. I don't need a purple colored lamp in my living room, okay? I hate it. I hate it. I don't like it. Can we please stop it with these colored Philips Hue lights? It's just not cute.
Well, first of all, I absolutely do need a purple colored light in my house. That's my one rule. Absolutely. And here's the thing, a lot of those images she shows, I get it. This is not necessarily what I want in my house. This definitely feels like a rave to me. You could certainly see the snake lights here around, and I get it. You might not want that vibe. It looks like the background of a tech YouTuber, not necessarily stuff for me. However, colored lights can add a lot to a space, right? So first, look at how beautiful this gradient is. Second, a lot of people live in really, really boring spaces and they can't change them, right? They might not have the ability to buy a bunch of furniture to make it look cool. It might be painted white. And again, your landlord doesn't allow you to change it. Adding colored lights in allows you the option to change your room all the time, right? You can make it different every day if you want to by using these types of lights. It can serve to be really soft and almost add, can almost look like art, right? You've got some specific pieces like this where it adds an element to the room, and instead of lighting it acts as that overall visual piece of art. They have these things called sunset lamps now, where you can shine almost like a spotlight, and it adds that artistic vibe. Now, here's the other thing. I also agree with him. I think, I want to say 75% of the time, the lights in our house, even though they're colored lights, you can change them to be a soft, warm light. And I agree, anything over 3000 Kelvin is not allowed in our house. I don't like those stark white lights. I certainly like the soft, warm lights here. Right. Just nice and calming. But yeah, everyone's different. Maybe, a purple to green gradient is what calms someone, and that's absolutely fine. And I think there are really eloquent ways to add colored lights to your house, especially if you hide them behind pieces of furniture. They can really add to the overall interest of the space.
This is something that I would never have thought that I could enjoy until I spent some time in your house and noticed how lovely the colored lights can make the space feel. And I think that some of those images that you showed were perfect examples of how this can be really, really lovely and really, really calming. And I also think that this is an issue of sort of sensory sensibilities that we talk a lot about here. And, I think that obviously Arvin really loves very warm neutrals, beiges, and, creams, and that's his aesthetic. And so I get that he wouldn't like all this color. But to me, I think it's kind of actually interesting that I feel like the colored lights in your home and some of the examples that you were showing there are where like we meet in the sort of postmodern design. Like you've got a home that isn't really very postmodern, but those lights can create that effect, which is also another thing that like it can kind of change up the whole design style of what you're doing in your room, and it can give you a lot of flexibility. But going back to sensory styles, I think that for some people, having those colored lights and being able to change the color can really be stimmy, can really be relaxing, can be soothing. And so, yeah, if that's the case for you, I think, did Arvin call it tacky? I think he might have called it
Yeah.
tacky, which just, it's not tacky.
Rough. It hurt.
I mean, some of the photographs he was showing, maybe, but even then,
Yeah.
like if you want to feel like you're in a rave, if you want to feel like you're on the set of a tech YouTuber, like if that's your thing, or if sometimes that's your thing, that's the beauty of these lights, is that you can change them up. Like if that's the feeling that you want to go with right now, then go with it. This last piece of design advice that we think that you should feel free to ignore is maybe not even bad advice, and it's from a designer that Gray and I both really love. So we want to put that out there, that we really love Nick Lewis. And this is a piece of design advice that I don't necessarily disagree with it in principle all the time. And for many people, it may be true. But for the specific sort of sensibilities that I have as a neurodivergent person, and that a lot of neurodivergent people share, I think that the opposite of this advice can be a really important accommodation in our spaces.
I think open shelving had a moment, and I personally have shouted from the rooftops that the lots and lots of open shelving, specifically in the kitchen, taking away all your uppers and replacing them with floating shelves, that is a trend that needs to go. It's impractical for most people. Your stuff's not that nice to display. The plastic kids cups, we've talked about this. No one needs to see your Tupperware. That's why you hide it behind this genius invention called cupboard doors, so you can hide them, because all that stuff is ugly and you don't need to display it.
Okay, just a little note. To be fair, Nick actually put out a video while I was editing this saying that he'd changed his take on open shelves thanks to disabled people pointing out in his comments that they can be really helpful for them, which is very cool. Thanks, Nick, for listening. Okay, back to Martin and Gray's takes on being able to see all of your things.
I think for a lot of people, this advice from Nick is not bad advice. And I agree that you don't need to see your kids' sippy cups necessarily, or the Tupperware, like on display on your open shelves. But for many people, myself included, and for especially lots of neurodivergent people, there is this sort of out of sight, out of mind phenomenon where if things are tucked away and put behind doors, and I'm thinking especially in the kitchen, it's just really easy to forget that it's there and to end up buying like you forget that you have black beans in cans, and you forget that you have cans of tomatoes, and you forget that you have a box of pasta, and it's all there in the cupboard behind the doors. And so you end up just going and buying new stuff. This is a real issue for a lot of us. And the solution for me has been precisely open shelving, and not just like for the pretty things. The prettier things that I wouldn't mind or actually might even like to display on open shelving in my kitchen are precisely the things that I have tucked away, like my dishes, which aren't exactly special, but they're colorful and they're pretty. What we have on the open shelving in our kitchen, by open shelving, I actually mean not shelves where the uppers are, but just bookcases, because this is what we could afford and what we, had around the house, is our pantry. Our pantry is all in bookcases that are open. And I've thought about, I could like put some pretty curtains in front of them or use fabric to cover them up. And then I remember, no, the whole point the whole reason that you have the pantry in the bookcases open to be seen is so that you don't forget that food is there. So I will admit that it sometimes gets messy and, and I don't love the aesthetic of it. But for me, accommodating my sort of disabilities around my neurodivergence is more important than the aesthetic of my kitchen. And the truth is, it doesn't really take that long to tidy it up.
Yeah, well, and I was just going to say, I love the idea of using bookshelves as a pantry because every pantry I've had the luxury of, having access to, because not every house has one, is really deep, or they have really deep shelves. And I think kitchen cabinets have, really deep shelves. Of course, you need to put pots and pans in them, so that makes sense. But, when you go to put food in them, it becomes really tough. Only what is on the front, like the very forefront, is what you're going to remember that you have and what you're going to cook, or what you're going to not get annoyed with, trying to search for. And so bookshelves, seem really like the right size to me to hold, most everything you need. So that's awesome. And, maybe you can even place them in a specific spot so that they're not immediately noticeable, but they're open to you. And that's great. And I feel the same. I don't really cook, so sorry, but that doesn't affect me as much. If I did, I used to cook, and I would like to again one day when I feel like I have time. But for me, this, I have the same thing when it comes to my closet, and so I think that if you're like me and you don't remember what you have and you end up wearing the same things all the time and your stuff is, nicely put away in a closet or in drawers, and every time you go to look for something or pull something out, you mess absolutely everything up and you never put it away, then maybe try something different, right? So some things that I love, this is not my house, but I have something like this. I got this, wooden valet stand at a thrift store once, and my sweaters or cardigans or light jackets are always on this because, I'll get cold throughout the day and I want to be able to put it on. And I'll probably just keep putting the same one on for, a week or so. So having that out there is great. Maybe I'll have my belt on there or, a watch or any accessories that I like to wear. That'll just stay there. And I love it. I love it as just a piece that's sitting in the room. And it also holds things that I use on a daily basis. And so, certain things like this where you can actually just kind of bring your wardrobe out in the middle of the room so you can remember it. And, everything kind of goes back in a place so that it's not, strewn about. This could be super helpful. You can, do things like this. Maybe take an old piece of furniture that has, glass in the way, and that's how you store your shoes or your accessories. This is unconventional, but really cool. And you can absolutely remember, things that you bought that you want to wear. Maybe you get a fancy coat rack, and, you just accept the fact that whatever, jackets or coats that you like wearing on a daily basis go on that, and it is an aesthetic piece. The other thing that I love, we actually have a guest bedroom where I hate the paint and the trim and everything in it and the flooring. all of it. So we plan to change it. My favorite thing in the entire room is the closet. They wallpapered it with this beautiful wallpaper. And so, the only reason I like going to the room is if the closet's open. So I think that's also a cool thing to do. You could just make your closet super pretty, paint it a color or wallpaper it, and you could just leave it open, right? Leave it open, put the stuff that you love in it, and make it go with the room. So these are all things that, I think just make it a little bit more accessible for me. I know myself. I know that, if I have everything nicely put away and it's all behind closed doors, I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to go searching for something. I'm going to change my outfit 5 times because I don't feel comfortable going out. And then it's going to be all over the bed, all over the floor. So you might as well just build this in.
I love those examples, Gray. And it's reminding me that on the live stream last week, or actually just yesterday, where we were talking about maximalism and cluttercore, and I had on my friend John, who was telling us the story of he wasn't really intending to take the door off of his closet. He just got so frustrated with it because something wasn't working with it that he ended up taking the door off and then realizing that he really loved it that way. And I'm actually intending to take the door off of the closet in my bedroom, partly because like the room is so small that to have a closet door doesn't make any sense at all, because if you open it, like it gets stuck on the carpet, and if I open it, you can't move around it. So, and as a consequence, we don't actually use that closet. Like we have so few closets in our house, and we have one in our bedroom that we don't use because it has a door on it. And then in the front room where most of my clothes are, I actually did a sort of like a mural inside of the closet that is mostly covered up by the clothes, but it's still just like every time I see like bits of it peeking out from behind my clothing, it makes me so happy. And the door of my closet is often opened. It's like a sliding door, and it's often opened, but I like my clothes. Like, I think that they're kind of pretty, like my clothes are kind of maximalist, just like I am. And it's like a feature, not a glitch, that the closet door is often open. I love that valet. I had never seen something like that. But in Divergent Design Studios, we've talked a lot about, in the interior and garden design lab, we've talked a lot about having a place to put those in between clothes, the clothes that aren't clean, but aren't yet ready to put in the laundry. Like, what do you do with those things, and how often they just end up on the bed in a pile? And many of us have taken to putting up hooks in our room, which a lot of people would think is just really aesthetically ugly. But it's another example of accommodation over aesthetics. So, so that's what I have. I have hooks right next to my bed where I can hang the things that aren't ready to go in the dirty clothes, but that aren't quite clean. What used to end up happening is that they would end up on the floor and they became dirty, Yeah. So this is like, this is an in-between accommodation for me. And it's my bedroom. Like, who cares, right?
Yeah, agreed. My mom always told me that I have to wear my jeans 3 times before washing them, at least. I don't know if she still stands by that, but I stand by it. I think that's great.
Yeah.
If it doesn't smell, you're going to waste water washing it. So, hang it up. Absolutely. And you can get some really cool looking hooks. Like, you embrace it. I think
exactly.
Lean into the skid, right? Like if it looks unintentional, that's fine. But if it looks intentional and you embrace it, it could be a really cool design aesthetic that is really unique. So, I 100% agree with that. But if anybody takes away anything from today, it's you absolutely must paint your trim. You absolutely must take off your closet doors. If you don't, you're not going to be in style 2023 if you don't take off your closet doors. And you have to paint your ceiling as well. And you need to go buy a floral couch. All those things you absolutely must have to do.
And the lights, you absolutely have to. Never, never, never be without colored lights in your home.
Yeah. What are you even doing if you don't have colored lights in your home? Like, get on that yesterday.